Come out of the dark earth, here where the minerals glow in their stone cells deeper than seed or birth. Come into the pure air, above all heaviness of storm and cloud, to this light-possessed atmosphere. Come into, out of, under the earth, the wave, the air. Love, touch us everywhere with primeval candor. The words of Mozart.
Good morning and happy Easter. Welcome to the Unitarian Congregation of Westchester and our online worship service. My name is Chris Hyson and I'm a lay leader in our congregation. I'd like to welcome any visitors to our online service this morning. We hope we'll have a chance to get to know you. You can say hello in the comments, send us an email at welcome@ucwc.org. We also hope that you'll be able to join us for our online social hour. The link and passwords are in connections, and we'll put them in the comments for the service and on the screen at the end of the service. Unitarian Universalism holds that great good comes from wide diversity. So whoever you are, whomever you love, whatever your heritage, and from wherever your beliefs spring, we are pleased that you are here. Let us walk a while together. We do have a number of announcements this Sunday. First, the stewardship team reports that we are 79% of the way to our funding goal, with only 57% of our pledgers responding. Thanks to all who have pledged so far, and if you haven't responded yet, please do. Our finance team is getting ready to prepare next year's budget, and our pledges are what enable UCWC to be the thriving community that we all love. Families and people of all ages are invited to join us on April 18th in painting kindness rocks to decorate our grounds for Walk the Chalk Earth Day event. If you'd like to receive a painting kit, please RSVP to dlfd@ucwc.org. Also, on April 18th, we have our annual poetry service. We still need a few participants. The theme is connecting with each other through poetry. Members and friends of all ages are invited to read their favorite verses, either your own or someone else's, or to submit a poem to be read. If you or your child would like to participate, send an email to poetry@ucwc.org. Send that in by April 11th, so 1 week from today, to be included in the service. Also, calling members and friends, both old and new, we are running our Explorations small group ministry program again. This is a great casual way to think deeply about what you believe, to learn a little more about our UU identity, and to make connections with our UCWC community. Come try it out. Send an email to adult-re@ucwc.org. Now, I'm not a Twitter user, but I came across some words yesterday in a tweet from Pope Francis, now paraphrased for our chalice lighting. It is always possible to begin anew, because there is a new life that can awaken in us in spite of our fallibilities. From the love and the imperfections of our hearts, we can create a work of art.
Thank you, Chris, and I invite all of us to sing together, Morning Has Broken.
Morning has broken like the first morning. Blackbird has spoken like the first bird. Praise for the singing, praise Praise for the morning, praise for them springing fresh from the word. Sweet the rain's new fall, sunlit from heaven, like the first dew fall on the green grass. Praise for the sweetness of the wet garden, sprung in completeness, where God's feet pass. Mine is the sunlight, mine is the morning, born of the one light Eden saw play. Praise with elation, praise every morning, God's recreation of the new day.
I love the way Miriam sings that song. Please join in our unison affirmation. We gather, aspiring to be a thriving, caring, and welcoming community that supports each person's spiritual journey, embraces diversity, challenges us to live responsibly, and is a catalyst for a just and compassionate world. And I believe Cassie has a time for all ages for us this morning.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. Now is the time in our service where we invite our children and youth to join those who have gathered here together as we listen to a very special Time for All Ages message. As always, let's begin with a nice deep breath in together. Ready? So today we will be hearing an Easter sermon from Reverend Dan about resurrection, a big fancy word that means renewal or coming to life. In the Christian tradition, Easter celebrates Jesus rising again from the dead and renewing God's relationship with all people. But we also see renewal and new life in other ways all around us about this time. Spring is a time for plants to sprout and grow, for buds to bloom and animals to awaken from hibernation, for birds to return from the south, and yes, even for those pesky but necessary insects to appear again. But sometimes this renewal and new life takes a long time to come about. They say a watched pot never boils, but perhaps they should say that about waiting for your seeds to grow. Well, I just moved to this area at the end of last summer, and when we arrived, there was a big, beautiful plant by our porch with tall stalks and gorgeous white flowers. And as usually happened, it wilted and died with the cold air of fall, and I've waited with hope to see if it would be a perennial and come back in the spring. But then we had such a wet winter with so many heavy snows, and inevitably those tall stalks of our plant got buried under heavy piles of snow. I got worried that it wouldn't come back. So with the few nice days we've had recently, I've spent the time to clear away the dead grass and leaves and broken off stalks around the plant to give it plenty of space to breathe and send out roots and get the sun that it needed. And then all I could do was wait. Transformation happens slowly, and often we can't see what is happening. In this case, all the work was happening underground. We've had a year like this. I mean, we faced the unexpected and we're not sure how we're going to come back, or if we're going to come back to what was normal or some new improved normal. Let's think about it with the imagery of our beautiful stewardship butterflies that Keat made for us. We started this pandemic like the caterpillar, and we are looking forward to emerging soon as beautiful butterflies. But we've forgotten about that middle step. Once the caterpillar goes into its cocoon, it completely disintegrates into goo, only to put itself back together again in a completely new way. Which does make you wonder if the caterpillar knows what's going to happen and what it feels like. Well, anyway, we are still goo right now. We are waiting to see what buds are going to sprout, what shape we will take, and what transformation and resurrection will look like in our lives. And this waiting is hard. Many of us have heard that you shouldn't help open up a bud to help it bloom, or break an egg or cocoon to help get the little animal out. This is because they need time to gather the strength they need to survive in the outside world. No, all we can do is wait and watch and encourage and celebrate what is happening naturally. This is where we're stuck right now. We can't force ourselves to bloom or break our boundaries until we are strong and ready to come out of this pandemic naturally. Well, I am happy to announce that while those reedy stems that got broken off of this plant at my house, they haven't quite come back, I have noticed new growths low down against the soil sprouting anew. Perhaps we won't come back as we were before, and it definitely will take time and patience. But we are breathing this spring air with hope and resting in the transformations already happening, even if we can't see them yet.
That image is going to stay with me for a long time. We are still goo right now. I sometimes feel like that. Thank you so much, Cassie. Our gooey congregation depends on the gifts that we give in many ways. The time that we all put in, the effort that folks like Eric Sweet put into running our broadcast, and everyone else puts into this congregation. The pledges that you all give, and thank you for those who have been able to send in your pledges, and of course the gifts we give on Sunday mornings. When we're here in this virtual format, as you know by now, we can't obviously pass the baskets, but we can give to our congregation in other ways. You can write a check and send it in. You can go to ucwc.org and go to the giving section of the website, or you can use PayPal. And if you wait just a few moments, we will have a little QR code, little funny looking code that will come up on the screen. And you just hold your phone if you have the app up to that, and it'll take you right to the site. These gifts keep us going as a congregation and have kept us thriving even through this very, very weird, very, very gooey time. So thank you very much for all of your generous gifts in all the different ways that you give them. And we will now receive our Easter offering. for these gifts and for all that we give in so many ways to all of our communities. We are truly grateful. Our reading today is from the Christian Gospel of Mark. When it was noon, darkness came over the whole land until 3 in the afternoon. At 3 o'clock, Jesus cried out with a loud voice, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani, which means, my God, why have you forsaken me? When some of the bystanders heard it, they said, listen, he's calling for Elijah. And someone ran, filled a sponge with sour wine, put it on a stick, and gave it to him to drink, saying, wait, let us see whether Elijah will come to take him down. And then Jesus gave a loud cry and breathed his last, and the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. There were also women looking on from a distance. Among them were Mary Magdalene, and Mary, the mother of James the younger, and of Joseph, and Salome. These used to follow him and provided for him when he was in Galilee, and there were many other women who had come up with him to Jerusalem. When evening had come, and since it was the day of preparation, that is, the day before the Sabbath, Joseph of Arimathea, a respected member of the council, who was also himself waiting expectantly for the kingdom of God, went boldly to Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus. Then Pilate wondered if he were already dead, and summoning the centurion, he asked him whether he had been dead for some time. When he learned from the centurion that he was dead, he granted the body to Joseph. Then Joseph brought a linen cloth, and taking down the body, wrapped it in the linen cloth, and laid it in a tomb that had been hewn out of the rock. He then rolled a stone against the door of the tomb. Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James, saw where the body was laid. When the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James, and Salome brought spices so that they might go and anoint him. And very early on, the first day of the week, when the sun had risen, they went to the tomb. They had been saying to one another, who will roll away the stone for us from the entrance to the tomb? When they looked up, they saw that the stone, which was very large, had already been rolled back.
Now the green blade riseth from the buried grain, wheat that in dark earth many days has lain. Love lives again, that with the dead has been. Love is come again, like wheat that springeth green. In the grave they laid him, love by hatred slain, thinking that he would wake again, laid in the earth like grain that sleeps unseen. Love is come again, like wheat that springeth green. When our hearts are wintry, grieving or in pain, love's touch can call us back to life again. Fields of our hearts that dead and bare have been, love is come again, like wheat that springeth green.
Our second reading is a poem by the Unitarian Universalist minister Lynn Unger. Let's be clear about this. It isn't the same as being sick and getting better. It isn't changing your minds at the last minute or pushing away from the brink. The only way to be born again is to die. The phoenix doesn't just go up in a blaze of glory. It feels the fire lick up and sizzle every feather until each quill becomes a column of flame carried straight to the core. Whatever the legend of rebirth, there is always time in the fire, under the ground, hanging on the cross or the tree. Don't skip over that part of the story. If you would be reborn, you have to die. But what then? After the dying, how are we to rise again into new and I? How does any of us find our way back from the valley of the shadow? The same way we die. Walk into the light. Our next hymn is one of my favorites. It's filling the air with deafening cries. They will rise, swarming. Silence comes, life overwhelming. It's not a zombie apocalypse. The 17-year cicadas are on their way. They won't be everywhere. In our region, they're spotty, so we may see very little in Westchester and lots in Downingtown or some other combination, but where they emerge, they will be hard to miss. They're harmless, incapable of biting. The worst they'll do is damage a few young trees and maybe stress some eardrums, a cost more than balanced by their benefits to the ecosystem. In some places there could be over 1 million of them in a single acre, a joyful and raucous celebration of life and renewal after so long in the ground. They haven't been dead this whole time. The truth is they've been with us all along, living quietly beneath the soil, counting the cycles of the seasons, waiting to rise. They're not a resurrection of the literal sort, or even eggs that took 17 years to hatch. Real live cicadas have been teeming underground all of these years, but we almost forgot them. They're under the earth. From our perspective, above ground living our ordinary human lives, there have been no cicadas for nearly 2 decades. We saw them come, perhaps, long ago, lay their eggs, and die. So it seems something of a miracle, albeit a potentially annoying one, when we see them rise again after so long. This is often the way of resurrection. From apparent nothingness, suddenly it seems like light shines and life thrives and angels sing hallelujah and the world is made new. We are made new. It all seems to happen at once. But underneath it all, renewal unfolds quietly and unobtrusively, bit by bit and step by step. Easter happened that way. Leave aside for just a moment your own beliefs. Let yourself enter the story of Easter as myth, and imagine it not as the story of Jesus, but of the people who loved him, and especially the women. When he died, the people did not expect Jesus to return. There was no promise of resurrection. He was dead, proven so by every standard of his day and ours. After the Sabbath, Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James, and Salome brought spices so that they might go and anoint him. It was a final act of love and mourning for one who to them was less a teacher and a savior than a friend. The ancient scriptures tell us that when they arrived at the tomb, they found the stone rolled away. Jesus was not inside. The stories say an angel, or maybe 2 angels, in dazzling white clothes appeared, and their message, while hopeful, was incomplete. Go and tell his disciples that he has been raised from the dead. As miracles go, it's an unsatisfactory one. If you are Mary Magdalene, if you are Mary the mother of James, if you are Salome, if you loved Jesus as a friend, as a brother, as a companion, you don't want to hear somebody tell you to go tell somebody else he is risen. You want to see him. You want to hold him. You want to hug him. You want to be with him and tell him all the things that you never had the chance to say. That never happens in the stories, except very briefly in a longer ending of Mark that was clearly added much later. But in the original Gospels, Jesus never appears to those who loved him so much that they took it upon themselves to care for his body physically and spiritually. All they had was an empty tomb. This was Easter, but it was unfinished. And it stayed that way for a long time. Decades would go by before anyone wrote anything down about Jesus' life and death. It would be a century and more before the scriptures fully formed and the theology solidified as much as theology ever does. But they did tell stories. The stories no doubt grew with the telling. Communities formed around what they remembered of Jesus' life and death and teachings, and those communities began to grow, and they began to talk with each other. It took generations for it all to happen, but they found hope, and life from death, and miracles. The spark was with them the entire time, but small at first. A remembrance here, a legend there, something borrowed from some other guy over here. They brought it together, and they called it life from death. It's still happening. Though millennia have passed, Jesus' teachings still live and inform our lives, whether we're Christian or not. It is renewal. It is a resurrection of spirit. And it is unfinished because it is never finished. It goes on. Now, I would be a little nervous in saying this because it sort of sounds like I'm preaching the gospel of a living Christ to a Unitarian Universalist congregation, but it isn't like that. This happens in our own lives too. My grandfather died on Easter Sunday. The Episcopal priest at his memorial service made a big deal of this. Grandpa had been a journalist, a White House reporter, and the priest, who never knew him, said that surely a communicator as effective as my grandfather was sending a message of salvation by dying on Easter morning. Even the Episcopalians in the family grimaced at that. I was in divinity school at the time, and so I thought Good Friday would have been the time for that particular message. But even so, it didn't sound like Grandpa's style to me. Other than mild annoyance and a cautionary tale about what not to say at memorial services, I never made much of the timing of Grandpa's death. I do remember and honor and miss him. It took me years to find some of the parts of him that are in me. Maybe it took me that long to grow into those parts of myself that I learned from my grandfather. But this year, as we've all been at home, I've been able to watch my son grow from the boy that he was to the man that he will become. And I have begun to see some of my grandfather in him. It's a sense of humor, a turn of phrase, a way of holding himself I sometimes see, a way of observing life that I can't begin to describe, but that fills me with happiness and love when I see it. Grandpa died 25 years ago this Easter. My son never knew him, though I often wish that he had. I don't know whether it's down to genetics or family culture or my influence or something else, but something of Grandpa's spirit does live. This is not the message that priest tried to wrangle out of my grandfather's conveniently timed death. and it isn't finished. But it is a true message of Easter because it is life renewed after we have died. We don't know when or how resurrection will take place. Sometimes it may not satisfy right away because it doesn't come in the form that we want or expect. It can't be forced, and it can't be faked. The women who loved Jesus as a friend never had the chance to be with him again, but something of his spirit returned and grew. My son will never know his great-grandfather, but in some small way his great-grandfather lives in him. We who endure griefs and hardships that devastate our lives can find renewal, but never artificially. In the past year, we have seen just how long some resurrections can take. For a long time, the prevailing ideology in our country had been that racism is largely a thing of the past, something we solved after Martin Luther King Jr. implored us to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. In the past few weeks, we have seen hate crimes directed against Asian Americans, the return of Jim Crow-style voting restrictions aimed at communities of color, and we have been reminded yet again of the deadly brutality and victim-blaming too many black people have faced at the hands of the police. We cannot wish these things away. Justice flows down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream only when we have done the work and dug the path. We're doing that work now, and some things are changing. There are many, many reasons for hope, but this Easter remains unfinished, and there is much still to do. We cannot pretend that the struggle is over. When the pandemic began 13 months ago, most of us thought the worst would be over in a month or so. I remember groaning when I heard Dr. Fauci say on the radio that quarantine could last as long as 8 weeks, although he hoped it would be over sooner. That was 54 weeks ago. We have been waiting a very long time. After all that time, finally, we can begin to see our way out from this tomb. It is unfinished, and the timing is far from certain. Some of us have been vaccinated, others wait anxiously for our shots, but it is happening. Literally, as I wrote this paragraph, my brother, who has been virtually imprisoned in his New York City apartment this past year, texted to let me know he had just received his first shot. I'm still going to be very careful, he said, but it is nice to have a specific date when things will be easier. It would be tempting to push it, to let go of the masks and the social distancing and the caution too soon, or to treat vaccinations as the end of precautions, but it would also be a mistake. As anyone who saw The Princess Bride knows, you rush a miracle worker, you get rotten miracles. It is not yet time. This is a long resurrection, an Easter unfinished, but also an Easter filled with hope. I know long resurrections don't get much poetry. It's the sudden epiphany, the bursting forth, the glorious fanfare that inspires the imagination. But the truth is so much better than that. Because the seeds of our rising have been with us all along. Life rejoices in abundance even when we cannot see it. The world awakens in wonder even when we do not know it. The steps are so small that we may never feel them. And when we're in that hardest place, the place of despair and isolation and death of the spirit, it feels like we will never find our way out. But resurrection happens all of the time. It is around us, it is beneath us, and it is within us. It is part of us, and we are part of it. Our words, our actions, our presence, our care, our kindness, our passion, our yearning, our willingness to love even when we don't know and can't see the difference it makes. These are the seeds of resurrection. These are the life beneath the ground. These are the hope of what is to come. We don't know what the end will look like, but with every step comes hope. This Easter and every day, look for the signs of the long resurrection. Look for the movement beneath the ground, the flower within the bud, the love within the aching heart. This Easter and every day, give yourself to the rising. Let it fill you, assure you, and become you. Then turn and begin to renew the world.
Out of
As we move into the time in our service when we as a congregation share the joys and sorrows of our lives, I invite you to sing the first verse of Winds Be Still.
Winds be still, storm clouds pass and silence come, peace grace this time with harmony. Fly, bird of hope, and shine, light of love, and in calm let all find tranquility.
Good morning. My name is Barbara Delara. I am a member of the pastoral care team and the contact person for the month of April. And a happy Easter to all of you. I have a couple of cards to read. For one who has suffered a stroke and is waiting for the results of an MRI to assess the damage. For a friend who is losing her ability to walk and after a bad fall has been moved to a nursing home. She has dementia and does not really understand how bad she is. Please send her some positive energy. And as always, we light one candle for all those joys, concerns, and sorrows that we hold in our hearts but have not yet shared.
Please sing the last verse of Winds Be Still.
Light shine in, illuminate our inward view, help us to see with clarity. Shine bright and true, so we may join our songs in new sounds that become full symphony.
Together we enter the sacred space, which is known by many names, and among these is meditation, and among them is prayer, beginning with a few moments in the community of quietness. God of many names and no name, Spirit of unending creation, we celebrate life that returns after so long in the tomb. When we are in pain, when we suffer, when the flame of life within our soul begins to flicker and fade, when we wait without end, when we can't find our way through the stones that bury us, we know what it is to be entombed. Open our eyes, that we may see the life around and within us, nurturing, guiding, lifting us once again. Open our ears that we may hear the beating of our hearts yearning toward life. Open our minds that we may know life and life renewed. Amen, and blessed be. And I invite you to sing, O life that maketh all things new. We close with words from Wendell Berry. Every day, do something that won't compute. Love the world. Work for nothing. Take all that you have and be poor. Love someone who does not deserve it. Expect the end of the world. Laugh. Practice resurrection. Go in peace.
A life is made of